What is up, hockey fans, and welcome on into the latest installment of the Mile High Sports Colorado Avalanche AMA. I am filling in for Miss Kim Becker alongside Erik Dean. Be sure to follow him online at RunRightArif. I'm at Media by AP. Arif is holding everything down for us online when it comes to our coverage of the Colorado Avalanche, host of the Hockey Mountain High podcast, obviously writing all the great articles and whatnot. And he was in attendance at last night's game. So we'll cycle through a few questions and also a handful of big talking points in the world of Colorado Avalanche hockey. And it's certainly been a little bit of a roller coaster ride over the last 2 or 3 weeks or so. The high of the highs, the lows of the lows. We'll break it all down here. And be sure to get those questions in each and every week when Arif puts out his tweet at RunRightArif. And away we go. Kim Becker will be back next week. But what's going on, my man? An exciting game to cover last night, I'd imagine.
Yeah. Honestly, exciting might not even be the word to say it, because it was kind of goal, and then the atmosphere. Everybody knew the Avalanche were going to come away with 2 points after those early goals, and it was kind of a dud of a game in terms of excitement. But in terms of the result, getting your top guys rested, getting 2 points in the standings, and doing it in great fashion, it was exactly what the Avalanche needed.
Yeah, a 6-0 victory. And look, San Jose is not the team they once were. They're definitely in a struggle this year. Only 19 wins on the year for them right now. The Avalanche with 35. And on the radio show with my guys, Cody Rourke, Danny Bailey, and all them, at the end of the show, we're like, who's scoring tonight? And we kind of threw out a couple of different names. We each picked a different name, and all 4 players ended up scoring. Last night was an absolute barrage for the Colorado Avalanche. Goals for Cale Makar. Nice to see him get back in the group. Valnichushkin, Lehkonen, McKinnon, and a handful of other players as well. What was the energy like? Set the scene for us in Ball Arena last night, and really, kind of a strong way for the Avalanche to snap that losing skid.
Yeah, it was. The game kind of started a little bit slow. Neither team had a shot for the first, I want to say, 2.5 minutes before Colorado started to kind of get rolling. At the 4-minute mark, I think the shots were 1-0 for the Avs, so not really much going on. But then they got a goal, and they got another one, and they got a third one. They outshot them 19-2. They had a 21 or 22-2 shot advantage when it was 4-0. They had a 24-3 or 4 shot advantage when it was 5-0. And they just kind of ran away with the game. I mean, the mood around the team and the atmosphere was, look, like the San Jose Sharks, like you said, 19 wins, only team in the NHL without 20 wins. They played the night before, which I know is a funny stat because there's like a couple of them with exactly 20 and they're the only ones at 19. Right. So, just picking an arbitrary number there. But it was, the Sharks had played the night before. Funny enough, they had beaten the Winnipeg Jets in overtime, which was, helpful for the Avalanche. Granted, Winnipeg continues to fall. They had beaten the Winnipeg Jets in overtime. They were traveling. They got in late from Winnipeg, so they had to go through customs. They got in really late to Denver. They didn't have a morning skate. The Avalanche were rested. Colorado, the last 3 weeks, has played 4 back-to-backs where they were the team that traveled to face a rested team. And they were 3-0-1 in those games. The only 0-1 was the Seattle game a couple days ago on Sunday that they blew it late. Otherwise, they would have went 4-0. But the Avalanche having the opportunity to be the rested team and face a team traveling with only 19 wins, coming from Canada, going over the border, over customs, playing the night before, being one of the worst teams in the NHL already, and then selling at the deadline. It was a game where everybody in that dressing room knew, we're going to get 2 points here. We have to do it. It's just a matter of how we do it, and how they did it was the ability to pile it on early. No forward played more than 16 minutes and 14 seconds. No forward played fewer than 11 minutes and 48 seconds. They were able to roll their lines, roll the defense, get everybody involved. No crazy hits, no crazy injuries. Curtis McDermott took a little tumble, so we'll see on him, but none of the top guys got into any kind of a physical, matchup where they might be hurt or might be dinged up outside of Renton and getting hit into the boards, but then getting right back up and scoring. So it was exactly what you needed. A very quick, easy victory with no stress, no issues, no injuries. Just take the victory and move on to the next one. That's what they needed, and that's what they did.
Yeah, I think you hit on the mark with the stress word. That was, like you said, it was, for lack of a better phrase, an avalanche of goals from them early on. And really, you were able to, you mentioned kind of the playing time and the ice time for some of these guys. And obviously, that's critical for a team that has to deal with some injury problems over the course of the season. And, we'll talk about some of those injuries here throughout the program. But before we get into some of these questions, I kind of started out saying the highs of the highs and the lows of the lows. So we had a 6-game winning streak, in the middle of February there followed by a 3-game losing streak to the Devils, the Stars, and Seattle, which was obviously fresh in everybody's mind before the game last night against San Jose. It's not easy to quantify, but like, what do you attribute that swing to? Like, how could a team go from playing so well, so locked in, maybe getting some good breaks, with the 6-game winning streak, and then just collapsing 3 games in a row, allowing 14 goals in 2 games at one point, and then losing in overtime into Seattle? How do you kind of attribute the swing there for the Avalanche over the last handful of weeks?
So in New Jersey, not to kind of pile on Justus Annunen, but if that's any other goalie, you're winning that game. The Avalanche had their game. They were down 5-2. I mean, they were bad early. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. They were bad early. The New Jersey Devils took advantage of those breakdowns and beat the goalie every single chance they got. It was 5-1. You blink twice, you open your eyes, it's 5-4. Then the Devils were able to make it 6-4. Colorado made it 6-5, then the empty netter. So they were like right on the cusp of tying it up every single time. When it was 5-4, they had 2 or 3 really golden opportunities that were all stopped by the goalie. So they had their chance to tie it. They couldn't quite get there. The Dallas game was the one that is the biggest issue, and we'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about why that is later on here in the segment. But in the Dallas game, that was proof that the Western Conference is a very heavy physical conference.
Right.
They might not have the skill and the attack that the East has this year. They may have not made those big moves at the deadline that the Eastern Conference did. But teams like Dallas added guys like Max Domi that play a more physical brand of hockey, and they already play a physical brand of hockey. And Colorado is already without their captain, Gabe Landeskog, who plays exactly that, a physical brand of hockey. And then they were also out Josh Manson, who was out of the lineup for the second time. Val Nichushkin, who was incredible yesterday against the San Jose Sharks, missed that game with an illness, so he didn't fly to Dallas. So you lost 3 of your bigger, more physical bodies from the lineup. Well, 2, and obviously Gabe the entire season. And Dallas handed it to you. If anything, the game against Dallas was the wake-up call that, hey, we like, they're sitting back and thinking, we are the Colorado Avalanche. Nathan MacKinnon is playing incredible hockey right now. Cale Makar is back in the groove. Our goalie is one of the best in the NHL this year. Bowen Byram has found it. Mikko Rantanen's got 42 goals, but if we don't show up and play that physical game against teams like Dallas, they're going to put us on our behinds, and we're going to lose this series quick if we play them. So that game was the wake-up call. The Seattle game was just a very strange, very funky game. Back-to-back, not a lot of good passes throughout the game, just a sloppy hockey game on both ends. I don't know if the ice conditions were bad. We didn't really ask the players, but it ultimately ended because of a very unfortunate but also unlike him turnover from Nathan MacKinnon late in regulation. And then in overtime, it's a coin flip. You win the face-off, you control the puck, you're probably going to win, and that's what Seattle did. So of the 3 games, it's the Dallas game that sticks out. It's just unfortunate the way it piles on. You play your backup goalie, he gets lit up. Then you go into Dallas and you have that game, that red flag. And then you come back against Seattle, you have that lead late in regulation, and then things just kind of unravel in like a 2-3 minute span. So the Dallas game's the one that's unfortunate. The Avalanche already had a stretch like this earlier on in February where they lost that close game to Pittsburgh in overtime after leading late in regulation. Then they got like their butts kicked in Tampa Bay 5-0. And then they came back to Denver, had a lead against Tampa Bay, and then lost it in the shootout. So they already had a similar stretch to that, but then they came out and won 6 straight. And yesterday was kind of the exact type of game you need to break out of that funk and get going.
Yeah, we'll see how they shake out moving forward. Games against the Kings on Thursday. They take on the Coyotes on Saturday, and then we move on to the next week with games against a handful of Canadian teams, Montreal, Toronto, and Ottawa. But let's dive into
that big 4-game road trip. That's going to be the big one. The Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, Detroit. I'll be at 2 of those games, but that's going to be the tough one. That's going to be the one that, with that back-to-back mixed in, you don't want to fall behind there.
Right. Yeah. No, we'll definitely keep an eye on it. Like I said, it's been a kind of a whirlwind of a season for Colorado, and we'll see what they can do here down the stretch. But let's dive into some of these questions, my man, and be sure to tweet at Arif Dean, at RunRightArif, each and every week when we do these AMAs, so that way you can get your question in. And we're going to talk a lot about the injuries, and let's start with the big guy, the captain, Gabriel Landeskog. Do you think the team is overselling that Landy might not return this season at least? And obviously, there's been kind of a question mark. I feel like I've had you on the radio show probably a dozen times over the course of this season, and this question always comes up. A little status update on Gabriel Landeskog. Do you think that they're playing a little safe? Where do you think the team's at with him?
They have no reason to bluff. I mean, in the NHL, like, look, there was a feature story by the Avs reporter at the Colorado Gazette last week where he talked about how practice in the NHL for most of the teams is an open practice. It's not like the NFL where they build 15, 20-foot walls and they give the media a little small portion and no fans get to, like, it's not secretive in that way. There really is no way to be bluffing and pretending like Gabe Landeskog is more hurt than he actually is, or taking that extra precaution. If there was a clear timeline on Landeskog's return, they would have said it by now. And it's not even like they did any long-term injury reserve kind of shenaniganery at the trade deadline where they're like, wink, wink, he's out until the playoffs. Like, there was nothing there for them to bluff. I think truly, genuinely what's happening is Gabe Landeskog shut his season down on March 12th last year in Carolina. He shut his regular season down. He had knee surgery. He was out until the playoffs. He came back. He played all 20 games in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and he played like the best hockey of his career. He was unbelievable. I believe it was 11 goals, 11 assists, something of that nature. He didn't participate in a single practice or a single morning skate. All he did was play the games. They load managed him through any skate that wasn't a game because they knew he was dealing with this knee issue. Then he comes back to skate in August. He realizes the knee is acting up. He has knee surgery again in October. And now here we are. He still hasn't played. So whatever's going on with this knee issue, just like last year, is not worth him coming back into the lineup and playing while hurt. I think genuinely there's two ways this is going to go about. Either he's going to play in the playoffs like he did last year and load manage through it and figure it out in the offseason. And this time, actually, whether they win the cup or not, whether they're celebrating all of June and July or not, they're going to get to this right when the Stanley Cup final ends because they waited until August without realizing his knee was going to act up again. They're going to figure it out as soon as the offseason starts. So I think one of two things are going to happen. Either A, he's going to play the entire playoffs, also load managed for morning skates and practices, and he's going to be Gabe Landeskog. Like, yeah, I know he missed a year, but we've seen this in the NHL before. Players miss an entire year. They come back for the playoffs. They're still their same all-star self.
Right.
He's either going to do that, or if we don't see him play at all, it's because he cannot do that again this year, because if he does, it's going to affect his long-term health. It's going to affect his long-term career. So it's ultimately a coin flip. Like, I'm giving you exactly what Jared Bednar and Chris McFarland and everybody in the Avalanche's brass gives us whenever we ask. There's no clear answer yet on what's happening with Gabe Landeskog because nobody knows. The way he's been skating, he has been ramping it up, which is good. He has been on the ice consistently. No setbacks where he's had to come off, but nothing to say, you know, circle this date on your calendar, he's going to play. So who knows? But if you're going to be that dynasty team that you want to be, the Tampa Bay Lightning once won a Stanley Cup where Steven Stamkos played like 2 shifts of one game in the Stanley Cup final, missed the entire playoffs, scored a goal, and that was it. And if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. But right now, there's no answer. Nobody knows if Gabe's coming back. He's obviously a huge part of this team and will inject a lot of life into a team that's already playing well, but we just don't know when it's going to happen.
Yeah, you know, he's kind of the heartbeat of this team to an extent, you know, him being the captain. You know, I'm curious to see how it shakes out, but it has been quite a bit of time, and you got to kind of trust the process here. And, you know, the luxury is when you're a Stanley Cup or a defending Stanley Cup champion, it's more about getting into the big dance as opposed to, you know, being the best team in a conference or whatever it might be. Just get in, roll the dice, and see where you go from there. And I think if Gabriel Landeskog plays, that obviously bodes very, very well for the Colorado Avalanche. All right, let's move along here. Question from my guy, Logan. He says, which team presents the toughest matchup in a 7-game series? Is there one team in particular you'd like to avoid seeing early in the postseason? And I'm curious to see your answer here because looking at the standings, you got Dallas with 81 points, Minnesota with 79 points in the Central Division. And then in the Pacific Division, you got Vegas with 82 points, the Kings with 82 points, and the Kraken with 80 points. And then you've got the Oilers as well with 78. Where are you going here in regards to this answer? Is there any team early on you think the Avalanche should try to avoid or would like to avoid?
Early on doesn't really concern me. It's just in general. In general, the only team right now in the West that I think scares the Avalanche, and not scares them, because if you ask them, they can beat anybody, and why wouldn't you have that kind of mentality? But the only team that, in my opinion, should scare them is the Dallas Stars, because look, like right now, the playoffs is shaping up in a way where Colorado could potentially end up first in the Central. And if they do, they play the second wildcard team. And that second wildcard team, like you just listed the Pacific Division standings. I think it's 3 points that separate the top 4. Like Vegas can fall down into the wild card. Edmonton can fall down. Calgary could come up. Winnipeg can switch with Nashville or Calgary. Like there could be any number of teams. If you're the number 1 team in the West, or the number 1 team, I guess, in the division, whether you're first or second, any one of those wild card teams could be your matchup, whether you're number 1 or you're number 2. You could be playing any number of teams. If you don't pass Dallas, it's shaping up like it's probably going to be a Colorado-Minnesota 2-3 matchup. Minnesota doesn't concern me. Yes, they're a tough team. They're a heavy team, but the Avalanche could beat that team. They could beat Vegas. They could beat Edmonton again. They could beat Nazem Kadri and Calgary if they find a way to squeak in. They could beat the Winnipeg Jets. They could beat the LA Kings, the Seattle Kraken, despite that loss yet on Sunday. And, they're playing LA on Thursday. We'll see how they do then.
Right.
They can beat any number of these teams. It's the Dallas Stars and their physicality is the only one. It just seems to be coming full circle. The last 3 series, the Avalanche have lost in the playoffs. In 2021, they lost to Pete DeBoer and the Vegas Golden Knights. Mm-hmm. In 2020, they lost to the Dallas Stars. In 2019, they lost to Pete DeBoer and the San Jose Sharks. Well, now Pete DeBoer coaches the Dallas Stars. It's 2 things that you haven't been able to beat in this stretch with this core, and it's probably going to be the biggest and toughest challenge for you. So if you get Landeskog back, things change. But even without Landeskog, you can beat the Dallas Stars. You just have to take that wake-up call from the other day very seriously. You have to come out April 1st at Ball Arena against the Dallas Stars and play a much better game than you did the other day in Dallas. And you have to show that you can hang with this team. Because right now, the physicality of the Dallas Stars is what could get the Avalanche. They have to make sure that they can match up with that. They have a good goalie in Alex Georgiev. They have that strong defense. And even the Dallas Stars, ultimately, they can beat them too. But that's the one that from the Western Conference, the Dallas Stars should present the only issue for the Avalanche this year. And I say should because you never know. Hockey is a coin flip in the end. So the Western Conference isn't as strong as the East. The Avalanche, in my opinion, are still the class of the West. But just because you're the class, it doesn't mean you can take any team lightly.
So to kind of feed off of that, let's go to the other question here asked by our guy, Michael Ferrero. He says, do you think there is any chance that the Avs could catch Dallas in the standings? I believe 5 points separate the 2 teams here. Dallas atop the Central Division with 81 points with a record of 34-17. The Avalanche at 35-21 with their 76 points. What's kind of your gut feeling here about the Avalanche's chances to potentially catch Dallas in the standings before the regular season is over?
It's very doable. They're only 5 points back, but the key is they have 2 games in hand and they play them once. So look, put it this way. 5 points back. Had Colorado won that game in regulation in Dallas the other day, you take 2 points away from Dallas, you give it to the Avalanche. They're 1 point back with 2 games in hand. One game makes all the difference. If that game on April 1st happened tonight and the Avalanche beat the Dallas Stars tonight, they would be 3 points back of the Dallas Stars with 2 games in hand. It's very reasonable and very doable. Those San Jose Sharks that they played yesterday, they play them 2 times in a row on the road in San Jose on a California road trip. They also have the Anaheim Ducks. They also have the Arizona Coyotes that you just mentioned. Right. They have, I believe, another game against the Chicago Blackhawks, if I'm not mistaken. They have the Detroit Red Wings. They have the Montreal Canadiens. They have a lot of easy, simple games coming up. I believe Colorado has top 3 in terms of easiest schedule the rest of the way.
Love that.
So you can very much make up a ton of points here. Even if you lose that game to Dallas, it's still within reach, but it's a little bit harder because then you're 7 points back with 2 games in hand. So aside from that game, you only have another 19 games where you got to make up 7 points in the standings with the 2 games in hand. So 3 to 4 points better than Dallas, and Dallas has the tiebreaker. So aside from that game, I don't see it to be as unreasonable as many are saying. I mean, yes, Colorado just went on a stretch where they picked up 1 of 6 points. But before that, they won 6 straight games. They are 15-4-3 in their last 22 games.
Right.
So it's very reasonable. Like, there's 20 games left. Is it crazy to think Colorado can go 15-5? Not really, because if they go 15-5, given how easy their schedule is the rest of the way, 15-5 brings you up to 50 wins. And suddenly this poor season full of injuries and issues and bad luck, and they still hit 50 wins. Like, it's very reasonable to do that.
Right.
But I will say it all starts with, well, obviously it starts with tomorrow against the LA Kings, but it all is going to be centered around, I should say, the game on April 1st against the Dallas Stars at Ball Arena. Because you need to win that game, and preferably in regulation. But even if you don't win it in regulation, you need to get that game over the Dallas Stars because that one is going to be important for you to catch them.
Right. Yeah, I'm excited, man. I mean, this is the best part of like when the winter sports you get down and dirty with the between the Nuggets and the Avalanche here. I know you and I were talking about you've got the Avalanche who are getting healthier as the season progresses. You've got the Nuggets on the other side of things, and I'm just. Both teams simultaneously playing well. Ball Arena is a rocking place right now. And that game against Dallas is going to be electric. So I'm looking forward to that. Just you talking about it, I'm like, yes, I can't wait. April 1st, circle it on the calendar.
Yeah.
Here we go. But let's end it on an injury note here. A couple of updates, and I'm going to sneak one in myself here. It sounds like Erik Johnson is already back in skating. Cover athlete of Mile High Sports Magazine. Go check that out on the website. We've done some cool stuff with EJ. Any chance we see him and or Josh Manson return before the playoffs? And then kind of the second part to this question is, do they need to return before the playoffs? Kind of talking, about that luxury with the Avalanche of having won a Stanley Cup. Do you think you want to prioritize, rest and recovery, make sure these guys are healthy, or is there a desire to get these guys back before so they can get their feet under them?
If they're ready to go, there is a desire to get their feet under them. Like, the whole Gabe Landeskog scenario that I played out earlier of him potentially returning in the playoffs and jumping in game one, like, if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do, and you'll take it. Like, Gabe Landeskog, number 92, let's bring him back in. But ideally, you want him to come back a little bit earlier and get a little ramped up, a little up to speed here, get your feet under you. Same thing with Josh Manson and Erik Johnson. So Jared Bednar was very open about both of these guys. The other three updates were Landeskog, no timeline, Helm, no timeline, Frankie, no timeline. But the three guys that matter or the two guys that not matter most, but had the most positive updates. Number one was Erik Johnson. He said that when Erik Johnson was injured on February 11, the initial timeline was 8 to 10 weeks. We are coming up on Saturday of 4 weeks of that. And he said EJ is doing a lot. He's doing a lot better and ramping it up a lot quicker than he expected. Mm-hmm. He still said I'd be surprised, and it would be kind of surprising to see him back before the 8-week comments or before the 8-week timeline. But it's looking like between 8 and 9 weeks from February 11, you're going to see Erik Johnson, which brings you to right around games 80, 81, 82. So there is a big chance that Erik Johnson plays before the playoffs. On Josh Manson, and I know the Avalanche have been really bad with injury timelines, but the upfront and very forward response that Jared gave makes me think that they are feeling a lot better about Josh Manson, because he straight up said he expects Josh Manson to play by the end of March.
Okay.
So in this month, which would give him 5, 6, 7, 8 games to ramp it up. Josh Manson's a big part of the team. Here's the key of the Avalanche. They have not had, and I'm going to include Erik Johnson, but you don't even have to include Erik Johnson in this bunch. They have their top 5 horses on defense. It's Taves, Makar, it's Byram, it's Manson, it's Sam Girard. And then whether you want to plug in EJ or JJ at number 6, Erik Johnson or Jack Johnson, those top 5 guys are always going to have more ice time than that guy at number 6. They haven't had all 5 of their horses in a game at the same time since November 4th.
Oh my gosh. That sounds awful when you phrase it that way.
Yeah, because Manson and Byram missed a ton of time. But when Manson and Byram came back, Cale Makar had his concussion issues. When Cale returned from his concussion issues, Josh Manson was injured again. They haven't had a game with all 5 of their defense. Like, this is something that I talked about early in the season. From preseason in September, I've been harping this. The Avalanche this year don't have the same offensive power that they did a year ago. Obviously, they still have Mikko Rantanen scoring 42. He's going to be on pace for more than 50 goals. Nathan McKinnon's Nathan McKinnon. Cale Makar's Cale Makar. But when you lose Kadri, you lose Burakovsky, and, things aren't the way they were a year ago offensively. But defensively, they have one of the best defenses in the NHL when healthy, which I know Gabe Landeskog and Darren Helm and Pavel Francouz all have that who knows timeline, but those guys aren't defensemen. The defensemen have the clear timelines. As long as, knock on wood, nobody gets hurt along the way while you're waiting for EJ and Manson, you have an incredible defense. And then you have one of the best goalies in the NHL this year that nobody is talking about, in Alexander Georgiev, who was 3rd in the NHL in wins. He's 5th in the NHL in save percentage. He's 3rd in the NHL in shutouts. He is playing lights out hockey. The Avalanche are going to be carried by their defense and their goaltending this year as compared to what they used last year in the playoffs with their offense. So if they can get their 5 horses back, and EJ at number 6, and even if EJ is not ready, you got Jack Johnson at number 6, you're going to feel a heck of a lot better about this team with Georgiev in goal and all those horses in front of him.
Yeah, and you kind of just alluded to it. One kind of thought that I have here is at the goaltender position, because Georgiev has been fantastic, but we've seen when you don't have Frankie that you kind of let go of the rope with the team. I know there's no update on getting Frankie back right now, but how do you feel the Avalanche will continue to monitor the situation with Georgiev, giving him nights off? I forget which game it was this past weekend, but Georgiev was pulled at one point because they were just down a handful of goals. I mean, you don't want to ride the guy too much because he's been fantastic, but you also want to make sure he gets his rest. But your backup isn't necessarily getting the job done.
Yeah.
How do you feel like the Avalanche will balance the goaltending situation down the stretch here?
That's a great question. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to give Annunen, Johansson, Kincaid, whichever one of them, if Frankie's not ready, they're going to give him some games against poor opponents. Because Eustace started 2 games. He started the St. Louis Blues right after they traded Ryan O'Reilly, a very beat up and bruised and battered and emotionally gutted team, and he came through and won. The second game that Eustace Annunen played, we just talked about it. It was the New Jersey Devils. They're 3rd in the NHL.
Yeah.
They are the 3rd best team. They are an offensive powerhouse. And that guy that San Jose sold off, and Timo Meier, now plays for the New Jersey Devils. Granted, he didn't play against the Avalanche,
right?
But they added that to that lethal offense. So, I just listed off all the easy games the Avalanche have. Could you have played Keith Kincaid or Eustace Annunen against the San Jose Sharks at Ball Arena on March 7th and won that game? Yes.
Yeah.
The clear answer is yes. So you can play him against maybe the Detroit Red Wings, maybe, Keith Kincaid or Eustace Annunen, or even Jonas Johansson, whichever one of those guys. You can play him against the Detroit Red Wings, the Arizona Coyotes. 2 more games against the San Jose Sharks, 2 games in a row on the road. Like, those should be easy games. The Anaheim Ducks, you have a ton of opportunity to get Georgi some rest. So Georgiev, right now he's at 40, I want to say 44 games.
Yeah.
The Avalanche have 20 along the way. So even if, or 20 to close out the year, even if he plays 15 of 20, 75% of the games, that'll put him at 59, which is a very reasonable, maybe on the higher end in the modern NHL of how much a goalie plays. But it's a very reasonable number for a guy that since training camp has been saying, I want to be the number one. I want to play games. New York Rangers didn't give me an opportunity. And every time you bring up these stats to him, like, you're the best at this and this and this and this, he's like, yeah, I know. Like, he's such a confident guy.
Yeah.
Talking about it since preseason. He knows that he's one of the NHL's greats. And if he can repeat what he's doing this year 2, 3, 4, 5 more times, people will refer to him as one of the NHL's greats. He just needed that opportunity and he's getting it. So again, even if he plays 15 of the 20 games remaining, he still won't even hit that 60-game mark that you rarely see in the NHL. So I think they're going to be perfectly fine. You don't want him to get hurt. You don't want him to get mentally exhausted. But again, the easy schedule helps. Rantanen and McKinnon playing how they're playing help. Getting Manson and EJ back helps. Adding Jack Johnson, adding Lars Eller and Matt Nieto and Dennis Malgin, and having all this depth also helps.
Right. Yeah, no, it'll be interesting. What'd you say? 20 or something games left down the stretch here.
20 to go. 25.
Wow, man, we're coming right down to it. And it's an exciting time to be an Avalanche fan. We'll see how they kind of monitor that goaltending situation as well as getting some other players healthy down the stretch. And away we go. Be sure to follow my guy, Erik on social media at RunRightErik. Check out his work online, milehighsports.com. You can follow me at Media by AP. I'm on Afternoon Drive, 4 to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. Check us out. We try to talk as much hockey as anybody in this town for the most part. So always having fun with that. Erik, my man, great stuff today. Appreciate you big time. Anything you want to leave the listener with before we get out of here?
No, that's basically it. Obviously, follow me on Twitter at RunRightErik. Check out Hockey Mountain High, your go-to Avalanche podcast. We're ramping up. This morning, I was watching the documentary of last year's Stanley Cup Championship, nice. And it just got me energized to travel and get into those games again, because the playoff, there's nothing like that atmosphere, and I'm so excited for it. We're 5 or 6 weeks away.
Good stuff. That's going to do it for us here on the latest Colorado Avalanche AMA from Mile High Sports. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Be sure to get those tweets in next week. Kim Becker will be back then as well. And away we go. Let's see how the rest of the games shake out for the Avs. Have a good one, folks.